Well, John, welcome to the Collective Good podcast. Happy to have you here.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining me. And I always like to start with sort of the backstory of the people that I have on the podcast. So I'm curious, where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm a Washington, Pennsylvania
Okay.
boy, and grew up there, and I call the mean streets of Washington.
Where's Washington, PA?
It's south of Pittsburgh, probably about 30 minutes,
Okay.
right down 79. If you've ever gone to Pittsburgh, you literally go out 70, where you turn left to go north. That's Washington, to go to Pittsburgh.
Got it. Mm-hmm. So you consider that sort of like a suburb of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it is. I'd say it's a little further out than most suburbs, and it feels like its own, kind of community. And it's, at the time I lived there, it was about 35,000 people in the city.
Oh, wow.
So pretty big city.
Yeah, it's not small.
Yeah, it's a county seat and all that. So, yeah.
What was your family life like growing up? You got siblings?
I do. Yeah, I grew up, Washington was a great place to grow up. At the time that I was a kid, the steel plants and glass plants and all that kind of manufacturing was still pretty strong. And probably half of the families, the parents worked in those various companies. And so, I'd say it's a middle class, growing up. But then, like a lot of little towns in Pennsylvania and Ohio, when the steel industry started to drop and the glass industry started to drop, it became middle to lower class in the city, and it became a little bit tougher. When I say the mean streets, you had to be tough to grow up in a place like that. My dad, everybody knew my dad, everybody knew my grandparents, so I couldn't get in any trouble because by the time I got home, they knew about it.
What did your dad do?
So my dad did a number of things, but he was a steel worker most of his life, and then it's just interesting how life goes in cycles. My dad, his brother Bob, my dad Jack, his brother Bob, and their best friend opened a restaurant and bar together with zero experience, like most people, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure.
How hard can this be, right? They saved up money and they built, they leased this place and right downtown Washington and built it out. And their friend was a bricklayer, so he built this gorgeous large horseshoe bar because the three of them also bought racing horses.
Okay.
So they own pacers and trotters.
Interesting.
And so this was just like a whole lifestyle thing. And by the way, like a lot of people in the restaurant industry, they kept their day jobs.
Right.
So my dad's a steel worker, his brother's an insurance guy, and the third guy's a bricklayer. And they also own a restaurant. Right?
That's crazy.
And they figured it out. It was hard, but I used to go up there and spend my Saturday mornings with him. That was my time with him. And
how old were you?
Oh, geez, I was probably 5, 6, 7. When I'd be going up
there.
there.
So very early on, you were in the restaurant.
I was, and and it was just funny being there and just kind of seeing like the restaurant early in the morning because it was a lunch and kind of a dinner place. And the hub and bub and kind of getting going. And my dad would just say, just help clean up a little bit, go wipe some tables down. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but as I got a little bit older, I did. And, my pay, people complain about wages today. My pay was all the Coca-Cola I could drink out of the fountain. So
it was a Coke house. All right.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. It was a different way. But that just taught me a lot about restaurants and hard work and hustle. Because these guys were working, full-time jobs, 8 hours a day, and then going, to the restaurants 3 or 4 nights, and they split off and helped out different hours, but 3 or 4 nights a week, and just hustle. Right? That's like an American.
Yeah.
It was so American to me. I thought everybody did that, but I fell in love with the restaurant hospitality industry as a young kid.
Did they have success with that business? How did it go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had it for about 7 years. It was called the Rustic Lounge and Restaurant. And then eminent domain came in, and that area in Washington got bought out by the state and local government because they were building a whole new office tower complex, trying to renovate the downtown a bit. And so they bought them out, and they bought the liquor license, which, if you know anything about this industry, that's probably the most valuable part of it.
Yeah.
And at that point, they did not try to get back in, to the industry. But it was good. It was a good run. A lot of good friends that they met, and people fall in love with local restaurants. And they had a regular clientele, and they had music in there. The Fridays and Saturday nights, and it is interesting in this industry. And I've been in this for a long time, but the number of restaurants goes up every year, even with all the noise we hear about closures and so forth, because so many people still dream. about being in the restaurant business.
Did you dream about that? When did you kind of realize that you wanted to go into food service?
So, like a lot of kids, you don't know what you're going to do,
Yeah.
right? And my path went through a bunch of things, but came full circle much older in my life when I got an offer to join the Wendy's company
Okay.
and be
How
back.
did that happen?
Well, excuse me. I was working up in Cleveland for a big retail company, American Greetings.
Oh yeah. The cards.
Yeah, greeting cards, wrapping paper, you name it. Big company, $2 billion business, right? And I got pulled over there to kind of help their public company part of it. So that was my job, investor relations. And Wendy's was looking for the same kind of a skill set and a recruiter. Most of my jobs where I've changed, and I've had many different jobs and careers. I've been fortunately pursued, in this case, pursued by a headhunter, and I said, "Would you like to join a restaurant company?" And I thought, I'm thinking restaurant company. You want me to go in and be the cook? I mean, what is it?
Yeah.
But no, it was obviously in the headquarters, and but I fell back in love with it. My opportunity there was just fabulous. The company was booming at the time. Dave
When was
Thomas
that?
was still
What year
there.
was it?
This was in the mid-90s.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dave Thomas was still there
Yeah.
as the chairman and then on TV. And everybody knew Wendy's, right? Not just like we kind of take it for granted if you grew up in Columbus, Ohio, you just think Wendy's has been around forever. But Wendy's had kind of a meteoric rise in the 70s and 80s, and in the 90s they were just chugging and doing really great. And Dave had so much to do with that because as the founder, obviously on the air, he connected with Americans, and it was just fantastic. And I got to join it and be part of all that. And my final interview, I'll never forget, my final interview was with him when I was going through the process.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Man, were you nervous about that?
Oh, gosh.
I would be so nervous.
I was on pins and needles.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Because, I went through the normal stuff with HR and the different people I was going to work with. And I said, yeah, one more interview, Mr. Thomas. I said, okay. And I'm sitting there. And just to show you the kind of guy he was, we talked for about the first 30 minutes, family, values, kind of what's your personal faith, what do you spend your time on? That's what he wanted to know about. And part of the reason is we were going to spend some time together because I was obviously going to be representing the company on Wall Street. And Dave was, a huge shareholder of the company, as you can imagine, and the founder and the chairman, the board and all that. And he just wanted to know, like, what was that going to be like? And at the end, I was like, do you have any questions about, what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do the job? And he goes, I know you can do that because a bunch of other people already pre-qualified you, right? My job's not to figure that out.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the culture of this company, right? And he talked about his 5 core values all the time. Like it was like a broken record. Repeat, rinse, and we went through all that. And, one of them, is respect, and you just learn when you're around great leaders, means a lot. And you do learn and you pick up, of course, from people that aren't good leaders, and you say, I'm never going to do that too. But I was lucky. Man, I hit that at the right time in my career, being around that influence. And Dave, as I later learned, as I studied more about all this, Dave was only 2 level 5 leaders I've ever been around, that close. And in most cases, I mean, if people really understand that paradigm, you might be lucky to have 1. Most people, it's 0. So I was fortunate.
So it sounds like your dad was an inspiration for you. Maybe Dave was an inspiration for you. Who else do you think back to as sort of your mentors who kind of helped you become who you are today?
I mean, if I go all the way back, in Washington, this was the time that they were integrating neighborhoods and schools.
Yeah.
And, I'll never forget, like, all of a sudden in first grade, they kind of ship people around the city. And the kid that sat right beside me ended up being one of my best friends in first couple of years. Was a kid named Fremont Catlin, and he was about twice as big as me. You know what I mean? But nicest, gentle guy. We just kind of hit it off. And you talk about when I talk about the mean streets. We used to play. We were great friends. We used to play dodgeball. Did you ever play dodgeball growing up?
Heck yeah.
And we played in a little gymnasium, right, where you don't know where to hide. and we would go at it. And the gym teacher would say, "Don't throw it at anybody's head, and we don't want anybody to get overly hurt." And of course,
Yeah,
they threw it at each other's
whatever.
head.
You're throwing it at her head. Yeah, come on.
But we just hit it off, and I just learned so much more about other people and the way people were raised and how they live, and I just had a great respect, and I just learned so much, and it was a very diverse way to grow up, and my family. On my mom's side, a lot of Italians, and so I thought everybody gathered and had gigantic meals all the time and picnics.
Did you do
and all
the
that.
Sunday afternoon thing and all that?
In my grandmother's standard procedure,
Love
and
it.
it was great food, but it was more all the family
Yeah.
together, right? And I'm talking about multiple hours.
Yeah,
not,
sure.
Not an hour. I mean, be there all day, big meal, then afterwards we'd stay, it seemed like we'd stay till 9, 10, this is summertime,
Yeah.
and outside the kids never went inside.
Huh.
We played hide and go seek and kick the can and just made up games,
Yeah.
and the parents said, "We don't want to see you."
Yeah. Get
lost,
out of the
you know
house.
what I mean? Yeah. And,
I heard that same thing.
Yeah, and it was good.
That
And
is good.
I wish every kid had that kind of an upbringing. I worry about kids today sitting in front of too much electronics, and I understand that's the world we're in today, but. Man, that was such a great way to grow up, and you
Really
learn
was.
so many things, about being tough, and learn how to be fair in games. How to be a teammate. You know how to respect other people and boundaries, and just all those things. You learn how to pick great teammates sometimes when you pick teams and things like that.
Yeah.
And what you value, and you learn life lessons, but lots of lessons there. And then later in life. In addition to Dave, I got a chance to be around and work very closely with Wendy's CEO, a guy named Gordon Teeter.
Okay.
And Gordon's the other level 5 leader
Okay.
that I've been around. The guy was so solid, treated everybody with respect, was kind of quiet, confident, exuded confidence. And when I first joined the company, and I'm spending time with people, and I'd say, "How's this work? What's going on?" And I kept hearing all these accolades about this guy, and basically what people say, I'd run through a wall for that guy. I went, And so I just listened to him, and we traveled together all the time, and I learned, listen more than talk.
How long were you at Wendy's?
Almost 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so then how did you end up where you are now? Tell everybody about that, what you do.
Yeah, so, after about a 20-year career inside corporate life, if you've ever had one, right, that's a long time.
It is.
Now, and it used to be people stayed in these jobs, 30, 40 years and retired. You don't see too much of that anymore. There's just much more turnover, and people move careers and all that. But 20 was about right, for me, and we had gone through some, pretty big changes. The organization at Wendy's merged with Arby's, and we had bought Tim Hortons. We went through a lot, and I actually in one of the mergers moved to Atlanta for 3 years.
Oh, okay.
As the only
Because the
executive.
headquarters moved down
Yep,
there, right?
yep.
Yeah.
So went there, but came back, and I started to teach as kind of a part-time thing down at the Fisher College here
Oh,
at Ohio
nice.
State, and really liked that, and I wanted to go kind of try that full time. I was teaching part-time. So exited from Wendy's, and had a fortunately a great departure from there. A lot of times they're not in corporate life, but good departure, and end up teaching at Ohio State full time for about a year, and
Nice.
just loved it. I could tell that was a calling, that I needed to scratch that itch, and the students are just so many of them, particularly seniors who have learned some things, and then I teach in the MBA program.
What'd you teach?
So I teach a lot of marketing and strategy. Yeah.
Nice.
Those are the two areas in particular. But, in the MBA side, oftentimes those students are 30s, and in some cases 40, in their 40s, and they've had careers.
Right.
They know what's going on. They come back to sharpen the saw, right, to get even smarter. And I learn from them. And they push you, and I push them.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I had earned a reputation of being a very challenging and difficult professor.
Really?
Difficult to get a good grade. Now I'm in your corner. You get a good grade from me, and I'll back you all your career. write recommendations, help you with resume, connect you with people. In fact, this morning I was on had a request on LinkedIn to help one of my MBA students, and I'll do that. I told them all that, right? And I still teach down there. But I got another, kind of knock on the door from another headhunter and said, "Hey, how would you like to run a business trade association?" And I went, "Probably not," but just kept listening, and they kind of reeled me in a little bit. And then I started meeting with the executive committee of the board. And just, at that time, what a great group of people, different types of backgrounds and so forth. And we just clicked. I ended up being what they needed at the time. And I said, I'll do this for a couple years. 10 years later. Now I'm in my 9th year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's a business trade association, and we represent all the restaurants across Ohio. We're membership based. So, people, pay to be a member. And from that, they get a plethora of just services, and they get advocacy from us. We bring in a ton of vendors that they can work with. And obviously we go out and give the good housekeeping seal on all that. And thought leadership and things that they just can't do on their own. We do it for them.
So first of all, you guys do great work. I've always been very impressed with not only the events that you hold, but the advocacy that you do. And having been someone I worked in food service for a long time as a server back in the 90s at Cap City with Cameron Mitchell, back when his office was in the basement of Cap City.
Right.
So he's come a long way. And then, I started a craft brewery and coffee shop, and got to see what that's like to be on the ownership side of establishing something like that. I'm very impressed with the work that you do. There's a few things that come to mind when I think of restaurants in Ohio. The first is, why is the restaurant culture in Ohio so vibrant? Ohio is, a lot of people think of our state as a flyover state. I don't believe that at all. And if you look back at the history of this state and how it was established in our huge metropolitan areas, there's a lot going on.
Right.
But statistically, it seems to be kind of an anomaly that Ohio, of all places, is sort of like, it's almost like the epicenter in some ways of a lot of restaurant work. They talk about Columbus as being sort of like the ultimate test market for restaurants, but not just that. There's so many amazing entrepreneurs who bubble up. They're from Ohio. They grow up here. Mm-hmm. They create these amazing restaurants. Why is that? What do you think is going on here?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have, I'd say, different. Different industries have done well here. Retail has done really well. Les Wexner had a lot to do with that, of course, right? Insurance is big here. And then restaurants, hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think, most cities will claim we're a foodie city, in most big cities, and they can argue that, and it's great fun to talk about all that. But we over-index in the number of restaurant companies that were founded here, and have grown up here, and are well known.
Yeah.
And, of course, Wendy's I'm partial to. But, in the city, you start thinking about these great restaurant companies, and you work for one, Cameron Mitchell Restaurants. It's, on its way to being a $500 million organization.
Amazing.
With, I think, a longer-term goal of being $1 billion, dollar restaurant company, which is just amazing. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you have White Castle, which was, built and grown here, and they're in their, multiple generations of leaders. Lisa Ingram's now the CEO, and I think she's 4th generation, and they do it the right way. Great culture. They win the best place to work, best workplace awards all the time. And, they have the restaurants that we're all aware of, but they also, they've built up a great manufacturing business as well. So they have different parts of the organization. They sell into the grocery channel. Donato's is a great organization. Jim Grody founded that here, right? And a super organization. And that's just, some big ones here in Columbus, big ones. But there's, you think about it, we have 50, 60, 70-year-old restaurants here. You go around the state, and I can just keep doing this all over. Tony Pacco's up in Toledo, which is an icon of our state. The Montgomery Inn in Cincinnati, an icon. People go from all over the place. All of our great chili parlors in Cincinnati, and Skyline, and Gold Star, and it just goes on and on. And Jeff Ruby, which has become a
So
big
good.
icon, right? I mean, gosh, you turn on the Kentucky Derby and there's the Jeff Ruby logos all over the air, right? I'm so happy and proud,
Yeah.
of all of these operators, and they've grown, and it's not easy.
Right.
You were in the industry.
It's
a
hard.
piece of cake, right?
No, it's really hard.
Every
It's
day.
It's
Every
relentless.
day. Yes.
Relentless. It
Yeah.
never stops.
Yeah.
Restaurant folks are the hardest working people I've ever been around. You know that. You've been part of that culture, but what maybe give some insight to listeners what it's like to be on the inside of working in a restaurant. What does it take to be successful? Because those names that you're talking about, those are all like huge success stories.
Right.
But if you talk to those folks to a person, they will tell you about how, number one, how much effort and went into that, how much work has gone into being that successful, and number two, how much it's about the team and the way that team has really helped to drive them forward. What do you think is that sort of magic of what happens in the back room of restaurants?
You got to be relentless to be in this industry. And you could say that for other jobs. I think of, the challenge of being a policeman,
Sure.
fire person, working in a hospital. I mean, I wouldn't say this is the hardest job on the planet, but I would say it requires perseverance, and you got to be relentless. And you just, every single day, you got to bring it. The minute the door opens or the drive-through window opens or the delivery opens, right? You have to go from whatever your day is to I'm on stage. Disney kind of talks like that, right?
Yep.
You're on stage, and in this industry, when someone is coming to you, they're coming for a great meal, but they're coming for an experience. And it's a little bit of a release, so whether they're coming in to get a cup of coffee or they're having a full meal or they're just going through the drive-through, like that's their moment, and so they're paying you for the product. There's no question about it. And product is everything. You got to have great food, great tasting food, coffee. I mean, and you get everything from fine dining to, or what I call our quick serve. But people even go to places like Sheetz now to get their food and coffee.
My kids
right?
love Sheetz.
I know, it's crazy, right? So, but I say anymore, you can't be average. If you're average, I'd say the odds are stacked against you.
Okay.
And I tell you what, I can walk into a place and probably within about 30 seconds start to form opinions. And everybody has opinions. Mine are based on, a lot of experience.
Sure.
And I get to see the failures and I can, kind of unwind why things fail. And it's a shame, right? Because those can be fixed. And that's one of the things we try to do, with the hospitality, Restaurant Hospitality Alliance for Ohio. Our job is to kind of help people be aware of all the things that they should be doing, because oftentimes people get in this industry because they make great meatballs at home. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, I should open a restaurant because everybody that comes over and has dinner at my house says I'm the greatest cook they've ever. Okay, great. Well, do you have $1 million to open, to build out a restaurant, open it up? You want to get a lease and, 7-year to 10-year lease. You got to go out and get a loan. Do you know anything about, do you know how to order enough food for a week at a time? You're going to do a walk-in cooler, like how many beers you're going to have? You're going to serve coffee, how many hours you're going to have? How are you going to hire? You're going to staff? What's the culture? And people kind of look at you and go, oh,
Yeah.
I got to do all that?
It's a lot of logistics.
Yeah. I, spent some time recently. I spend time with our biggest operators and most successful, and then I make time for the people who are just starting. And I go and tell me what you're doing, what's going on, what can we help you with, what are the challenges? And even like I've spent some time with Cameron Mitchell recently, right? And here he has this huge organization. And one of the things I think when you have a big company, you got to have forward-looking growth, because you got a team and everybody's looking to grow and be promoted and have different opportunities. And so he's kind of always thinking about where's my next restaurant and what are the next opportunities. And then I talked to somebody, I was with brand new husband and wife, opened a place called Blue Sky Coffee down near Dayton. And they're just getting started. And they're literally just trying to make sure they can open every day, right? And get a few more customers to come in and get some loyalty cards and just like all those basics, that they're trying to figure out. And this industry spans that, and that's what makes it fun, right? And, we're well over 25,000 restaurants and hospitality locations in the state of Ohio. So we're the 7th biggest state in terms of, people eating out and restaurants and all that. We're huge, right?
Yeah.
And there are some, the other states, as you can imagine, are places like California and Texas and New York are bigger, but we're very, very much near the top. And I think we over-index a little bit, you know what I mean, based on our population in terms of eating out.
Sure.
But we have so many great choices. Everything you want is here, right? And it's not just meat and potatoes, because that was sort of our calling card for a long time, I think.
Yeah.
But now we have so many great ethnic foods that have just popped up all over the state.
Yeah.
I mentioned Tony Pacos. It's some of the best Eastern European food that I've ever had. And I grew up. My wife's family made a lot of that food, and I took her there, and she said, "This is the real deal." Yeah. So you're lucky. You don't have to leave our state. To have great experiences, and it really comes down to the people. At the
That's
end
a
of the
gift.
day. Yeah.
So hospitality is in your organization's name.
Yeah.
And that's a recent change, right? When did you guys add that?
Yeah, so last year, really towards the end of 2023, then going into 2024. And Ryan, the reason we did this, we've been in the restaurant industry, association for over 100 years, and that worked pretty well. During the pandemic, and everybody can remember what that was like, we had to fight like heck to keep this industry open.
Yeah.
We and some other groups, but we were really at the front. And we were working for restaurants primarily, but as we were working on federal programs, and we were right in the middle of all this, because myself and Todd Bowen on my team and others were very connected nationally. And so we were fighting for the Paycheck Protection Act and the Flexibility Act and grants and everything, loans, ERTC, you name it, right? And we were able to keep winning over and over and over again. And groups who weren't necessarily pure restaurants kept coming to us and saying, "Can you help us? Like, we don't know, like, we're not going to make it." So bars, breweries, caterers, you name it, food trucks. And so we fought for all them as well.
Yeah.
And in even hotels. And so, excuse me, coming out of that, what happened is people say, "Well, we're not really, maybe we can somehow be more part of you, but we're not really a classic restaurant. It feels a little, weird. What can you do about that?" And so I had this in my mind for 10 years that we should be broader. So we worked on it, went with the board and, worked on it and rebranded and renamed. So 100 and some years, the Ohio Restaurant Association. And now, for a little over, almost, we're going on a year and a half. We're the Ohio Restaurant Hospitality Alliance, and we're just more welcoming to everybody. To give you an idea, we now have 50 craft brewers who are part of our membership.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And we help them on a lot of things that they have a great association, that focuses on a very specific thing for craft brewers. And then we provide the flyover, right? We can do all the other things for them.
So first of all, I think it's cool that you open the doors a little bit more. I think that's a very wise decision. What does hospitality mean to you? Because for me, you talk about sort of being able to assess the success or maybe not success of a restaurant 30 seconds in. To me, that's sort of like you're assessing the level of hospitality in the room. At least that's how I look at it. What does hospitality mean to you?
It's every cue that you get, and it's probably more classic to think about when you walk in someplace. Hospitality is less of an issue when it's drive-through, and even less of an issue when it's delivery, other than perhaps the way you interact with the technology, or if you actually talk to a human.
Yeah.
But it's a little less important. You know what I mean? There, it's all about speed, ease of ordering, packaging, and do you actually get the right items and all that kind of thing. But when you walk in to a restaurant or a bar or a craft brewery, it's every cue from the second you even pull up to it. What's the signage on the outside, right? How clear is it? Does it kind of show you where to go? Is there wayfinding if you need it, depending how big it is? The minute you walk through, what's the vibe? What's the music? What's the lighting? What's the signage? Does somebody say hello? Do they recognize you? It's everything, right? How quickly does someone come up and say, "Good to see you," even if they're busy, and say, "I'll be with you in a minute. I'm taking care of this table over here, and I'll be over here." And I told everybody during the pandemic, as you can imagine, all the interviews and things we had to do, be patient when you walk into a restaurant. And consumers did. But now we're back to normal, right? And the expectations are very high again by consumers and coming in. And you got to meet those expectations. And, people just want to feel respected. I'm in here for an hour or however long I'm going to be here, and I want to feel good about it.
Yeah.
I don't want you to bug me too much, but I want you to get it just right.
Yeah.
You're checking on me, my order's correct. Do I need my water refill? Just every cue in a restaurant. And I'm going to tell you, if you're average, it's going to be hard to make it. You have to be good.
Absolutely. And I think now, maybe more than ever, the expectation of customers is super high because, and I don't know if I'm sure you noticed, but during COVID, it felt like customer service kind of took a back seat or even regressed a little bit, not just in restaurants, in general, in life. I don't know exactly what happened, other than I think people just made a decision when they were working that there were other things that were a priority to them, whether it was their health or safety or whatever. And for the longest time, it was very confusing to me because, having grown up in the restaurant industry, working as a server, I would walk into restaurants and I would see a bunch of empty tables, and then the greeter would tell me, well, we can't seat you for another 30 minutes.
Right.
And that was very confusing to me. And I'm guessing that for other people listening, that was confusing to them too. Maybe give some insight into what it is about operating a restaurant and why you would see that at that point, and kind of how things have kind of come back after COVID. What's your thought on that?
COVID changed everything, changed our world, but it certainly changed this industry, because at the time, so many people left the industry during the pandemic, and some people came back, some didn't, and we had to work through that for a couple years. And then really around 2022, we had kind of a rush of customers coming back.
Okay.
People wanted to get back out, right? It felt safer, and people weren't wearing masks as much and things like that. And we had this odd situation of more people wanting to go out than more people wanting to work, because there were still a lot of people getting government benefits, and it was easier just to kind of stay home or work some kind of other career.
Right.
And so we had an imbalance. There's no question about it. Attitudinally, things changed a bit as well. There were tons of jobs. So if you didn't like what you were doing, just go somewhere else and get another job.
Yeah.
And when you have that imbalance, I think, it's not really good for customer interaction and so forth. And I just noticed kind of an odd thing. You'd go someplace and someone would give you service and you'd say thank you, and they'd look at you and say no problem, and I'd say I didn't have a problem. How about you're welcome? You know what I mean? Just like little things like that, right? If someone says no problem to me in a restaurant, I know they're not being trained. No one's paying attention to them. You know what I mean? At Chick-fil-A, what do they say to you?
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Right.
Little things like that, and you think what's the big deal? Well, Chick-fil-A almost does $9 to $10 million per restaurant per year.
It's wild.
Okay. And it's, of course, the food is good and the service is good, but it's everything.
Yeah.
It's the attitude. You look at those people working in a Chick-fil-A, 9 times out of 10, they have the best employees at quick service. And it's just amazing to kind of watch it, and, but I think that's the opportunity people have as well, right? Train your teams, right? Treat them well, make sure that they're paid fairly, no matter what kind of restaurant you have. It's hard though, right? Oftentimes people say, well, you should just double the pay for everybody and give them full benefits and take care of them in a different way. Well, restaurant margins are tight.
Yep.
They always have been, right? In a good restaurant, 5 to 10% profit margin at the bottom line is about the average across the United States.
Yeah. Say that again. 5 to 10%.
5 to 10%.
Which, that's not a lot.
No.
I mean, you're talking about 5 cents for every dollar that they make.
When you put everything on the line to open the restaurant, which people who are in the industry know this, right?
Yeah.
You might mortgage your house.
I
sell your
did
car,
that. I
right?
put my house on the line.
Right. You don't eat as much. What do you have to do it? And at the end, out of every buck, you're bringing home a nickel. And then at some point, though, you have to reinvest in the restaurant. So you got to put a bunch of money away because
So it's even less than a nickel.
Well, yeah, because you have a physical facility you got to keep up, right? Oh, the roof goes bad, or the plumbing goes out, or things like that. This is not, for most people as they start out, this is for sure not a get rich quick scheme, right? This is this is the
or get rich ever. I mean, it's hard.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, and that's what we talked about, some of these big successful companies, which is fantastic because it can happen, right?
Right.
And we have tons of members who have now arrived, and they've had a good career and they've built business and they make good money and all that. But many of our businesses, I'd say 70% of our businesses who are members call themselves mom and pops.
Yeah.
They might have one location, 2, 3, 4, but I mean, they're really scratching. They're in every restaurant every day. like we went down to Centerville and we were with a guy named John Thomas who runs really good concept down there called Double Days, and then they have another one called The Famous. And I said, "What's your day like?" He says, "I'm at all 4 restaurants every day. That's I'm just constantly on everything, working with the team, the servers, making sure that And he has a brother and sister that's in the business, and they all do different things. It's a full time, almost a race." Every day. And by the way, he's one of thousands that are just like that. They're doing that. But I respect them, right? Because it's tough business and people hustle. And if you hustle and do things the right way and lean on some people for help, people that know what's going on. Sometimes it can be, somebody else in your town that's good and you become a friend with them and you learn from them, but you also have the association to get help from. And you need to just constantly learn and get better. I don't care, Dave Thomas, used to talk all the time about, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm going to hire people around who are smarter than I am.
Which makes him smart.
Yeah, exactly.
So it seems to me that the future is bright for the restaurant and hospitality industry in general in Ohio. What do you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, it's interesting. We get asked that a lot, right? And sometimes we get into the minutia of what's sort of happening right now or the next 3 months, and you have to, right? For example, have you heard the price of eggs, right? Here in January 2025, are about $6 a dozen.
Yeah.
Right. And so for a breakfast restaurant that about a year ago was paying two and a half.
That's a huge
change. Your
change.
core item is tripled.
Yep.
And so what do you do, right? And they just can't go jack up all the prices, right? So they've got to figure out how to manage that, maybe take some price on other items, take some things off the menu, and just try to maybe get through this. Now, by the way, the egg situation is caused by a bird flu situation we have now, right? It's causing a lot of pressure on that, but it's always something, right? Beef goes up, labor to build a restaurant is through the roof right now. It's just everything. But even with that, and you hear about the celebrated closures, and we've had some big bankruptcies in the industry, big brands, going bankrupt like Buca di Beppo and Red Lobster. And but for every one of those, we hear like, hey, another chain says we're building another 100 units this year, right? And so I don't know. People are very optimistic. We're glass half full. A bunch of people in the restaurant industry. People might say we're fools, but
you have to be.
But you have to be because you got to bring it. You got to bring the energy. You got to bring the enthusiasm,
Yeah.
and that's what we do. Like when we show up someplace, our job is to come in and say we got solutions. What's the problem? You know what I mean? And we really work with people, but we bring the enthusiasm too, and say, hey, you can do it. You brand new little operator, and I see it all. Like I was at DeCarlo's Pizza. It's like it downtown. It's like a tiny little opening. It looks like a garage, right? And they're making pizza out of that. And their dream is to penetrate more into the Columbus market, which is hard. We got great pizza,
Yes, we do.
in Columbus, right? But they'll get a good product, right? And they got to get the other cues right, and we encourage them as well, right? So it's never ending. It's a dynamic business.
Yeah, and speaking of pizza, I'm fascinated. Are you familiar with Dave Portnoy?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So the whole like craze of pizza ratings, he's not the only guy, but he sort of is the guy who put that on the map. And now there's all of these different sort of viral pizza rating guys and girls who are going around, and that's all they do is just they literally walk in, grab a slice, eat it, and then give a rating. It's the way that consumers have kind of taken over the process of validation of restaurants is very interesting in the last 5 to 10 years. So the rise of Yelp and online rating systems and that kind of thing. I know, like for me, if I ever travel somewhere and I'm looking for a restaurant, the very first thing that I do is open up my Yelp app and see what other people are saying about what's good. How do you think that's changed the industry?
I love it. Consumers are empowered more than ever. You don't have to guess. Those ratings are pretty good, right? You go in, if it's 4.4, I'll give it a shot or whatever, whatever the rating scale is. And comments that people have. That's what I mean. You can't be average anymore.
Right.
If you're average, people are going to say, well, why would I choose that? If I can only go out, let's say, you're a person that goes out twice a week, you're going to be very discerning on where you go, right?
Yeah.
And you do, my kids, they do all the research before we go someplace. They go, that place got bad reviews, or that place is up and coming. Let's go there. Let's try that, right? Okay. But they've grown up like that. They think that's normal to do that. And so again, if you're average to below average, I think you're going to have a hard time maintaining your sales, let alone your profitability, particularly in a tough time like we've been through the last 3 or 4 years. I've mentioned to you that in our industry, when I say tough time, and we've had food cost up about 30% over the last 3 to 4 years, labor's up 30%, swipe fees, which is what we have to pay to use credit cards, is up 25%, 30%. I mean, all across the board. Of course, building a restaurant today is very expensive. It's just you've got to be better and better and better to get that 5 to 10%, profit margin out of your investment. And but even with that, it hasn't stopped people from diving in. And you read the Columbus Dispatch or some of the other publications around here, and what's some of the most popular stories? New restaurants opening.
Yeah.
And people are just clamoring to go try them and talking about them. We love talking about going out to eat. It's great. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I follow Dan Eaton and Breakfast with Nick and these guys religiously because I'm very curious what's going on in the industry, just as a lover of the restaurant industry and food and in general.
I did a food tour yesterday with a couple of our board members, right? And everywhere we go, we're getting some food and all that, and the servers will come over. Why, you okay? I said, we're going to be in multiple restaurants today, right? We were trying, different things and just getting to learn and all that. And the two I'm with are experts at this, right? And I wouldn't call myself an expert. I'm around it a lot, but I'm not the foodie as much as maybe those two were. And we kind of did our own little ratings, but they were getting cues for things to use in their businesses, perhaps, right? Because they're both restaurant operators, and it was just interesting to listen to them. But we all do it, whether we're professional or we're just we're just going out on a Friday night somewhere. And I love it when someone comes to work on, say, Monday, and I say, "How was your weekend?" "Great. I went to this new restaurant. Yeah, you should try it." Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what we do all the time. My wife and I love going out to restaurants. It's a big part of what we do together. And we do have our own little rating scale, and we always ask each other, what do you rate this? And we rate it on the overall experience, the food itself, the ambiance, we have all these different things. Yeah. We never tell anybody else about it. It's just the two of us having that conversation together.
Yeah, but that's what's fun about it.
Yeah.
But it extends. If food's kind of the center of the plate, pardon the pun, right? But then it goes to, what do people like to drink, and what are the new sodas, and what are the new, bourbons, and what are the new, it's everything around drinking and eating. Because as humans, of course, we have to sustain ourselves, but this has become more than that, right? It's now to enjoy ourselves. I go back to you and I kind of start off. It's the experience.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what makes this industry, so interesting and continues to grow. The industry hit $1.1 trillion in sales.
Wow.
In 2024.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's a lot of revenue.
It is.
But even more than that, I feel like restaurants are sort of the fabric of any community. And it becomes sort of part of your family in a way, right? I mean, everyone has kind of their place, and so many memories and special occasions are tied to those places. Why do you think that is? Why is it so important to the fabric of our lives to be connected to a place like a restaurant?
You think of human psychology and what are the cues in our minds, and I talk a little bit about where I grew up, and every once in a while, I'll go back and I'll try to drive around my own neighborhoods, and we lived in two different parts of the city, but different cues will come back and trigger. And sometimes it's a visual, sometimes it's a road you're driving down, sometimes it's even a smell, or just some memory gets triggered. But oftentimes you go by a restaurant and go, oh, geez, I remember going there when I was in high school with my buddies, right? Or wow, that's the place I went with my wife, when we were dating, and they're warm memories, right? Those are, you try to remember those good things, and oftentimes you're there with your friends or your family or both. When we celebrate, oftentimes what do? We go out to a restaurant with our friends and family, right? And we're happy, and we're having a great time. And I think that's not a unique American experience, but I think we've elevated it. Some of the European countries are really good at this too.
Sure.
But we've just taken it to another level, and we have just so much variety in the United States. We're very rich from that standpoint. I love like walking into a place and you'll see, like we were out yesterday at a couple of restaurants and I looked over and there's like three guys in a booth and I could tell it was just a little reunion. I could tell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they were hugging before they sat down.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple, an older couple sitting there. Then there's some young people and having their coffees and just enjoying and just laughing. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. It's a good thing. We need a release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. It's a good answer. Well, so the last question that I like to ask everyone I want to ask you is, let's just fast forward 30 years from now and you're kind of sitting on your couch looking back at your career and your life. What do you hope your legacy is that you leave with folks? What do you hope your legacy is?
So there's a lot of things you do. You touch a lot of people in your life. Sometimes you don't even realize it. I have, wonderful wife. I've been married 37 years, right?
That's awesome.
And hope she's still putting up with me as we move down the road, But you know what it's like to have a happy home.
Yeah.
We have three kids who we're all very close with, and they're all making their way, through the world with their jobs and their careers and loved ones in their lives, and they're around us a good bit, which we're blessed. They're a little bit older than yours, right?
Yeah.
But so that's really important. That's the legacy that the people who are with the most, that they're happy and that they think a lot of their parents and their dad and things like that, right? So that's number one. I think I've gotten involved in a lot of different things in my life, fortunately for me, because I get bored pretty easy, So what I'm in right now, I'm trying to help 25,000, restaurants across the state be successful. So that's important. I hope we keep doing that. I teach, so I've now had thousands, probably over 1,000 students that I've taught.
So cool.
You know what I mean? And hopefully they'll think back one day and say, yeah, that knucklehead wasn't so bad. I learned a thing or two from him.
Even though he's a hard grader.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm on some boards, and I purposely have picked. I'm purpose driven, so I purposely pick the stuff I spend time on.
Yeah.
So I'm on the Dave Thomas Foundation. I was on the board for a long time, and I've stayed on their investment committee because I have a particular set of skills, as they say.
Yeah.
I can help them there, and it's a great cause, right? Foster care, adoption. I've been on the board at Ohio Dominican University, which is a faith-based institution, which is extremely important to me. It's a center of the plate for me. And, teaching at Ohio State, I like that as well, just because I know that so many of those kids are going to be our future leaders coming out of a place like that. And if I can have a good, an impact on them, really that's it. You know what I mean? Just positive. I think back the influence that people like my dad, Dave Thomas, Gordon Teeter had on me, and I think about them almost every day, right? That's maybe I can have a little bit of that with the people that I touched.
Well, I'm confident that you are having that kind of impact on folks, and keep up the great work that you're doing, and really appreciate you coming on to talk here today, and look forward to all the great things that you do in the industry.
Thank you. Glad to be here.